Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar on the topic of a changing game, the augmented and virtual R&D workforce. So just to set the scene before we begin, so I guess it's no secret that extended reality technologies are moving beyond the realms of gaming, and there's increasing adoption within other sectors, including the pharma and biotech industries. So looking at the benefits, these sorts of technologies can bring to learning and development, which includes bringing realism to training, and also perhaps the aspect of engagement is better as well. And then when you look at trainees being able to access tutorials, that can be more efficient, and also perhaps sometimes training situations can involve hazardous situations. So of course, we're focusing more on laboratory R&D. So there might be some situations in which training in a close to real life environment, but not actually there and then, can have a benefit. So these are all sorts of topics that our panelists are going to touch and expand upon in the discussion. So just looking at what that means for sort of the broader context, and some of the conversations as well that One Nucleus typically has around training and skills. So given that, there is talk in the life science sector about a sort of a talent shortage, there's a lot of talk among companies about how they can attract and retain the best staff, and how companies can be sort of the best place to work. So a part of this will relate into sort of training opportunities and resource opportunities. So I guess you could say that training means retaining, and also, a really healthy work environment and a stronger employer brand. So the success is almost perpetual when you put the two together. So also another important aspect, I think, is these sorts of technologies during the pandemic were very instrumental in enabling workers to carry out duties where travel wasn't possible. So another aspect that would be interesting to focus on in this discussion is moving post-pandemic, what the uptake of these technologies will be. Will we see more acceleration, etc.? So I'm delighted that we have the panel that we do here today to discuss the use of these technologies in training and collaboration. So just a kind reminder, if you're not part of the panel, to please remain muted during the discussion. But also, if you would like to put a question forward, then the chat box is enabled. So please do use that. And if you'd like to direct your question to a specific panelist, then indicate who, no problem. As you'll see, we are recording. So if you'd like to remain anonymous, then you can actually direct your question to me, and I'm more than happy to read that out. So what I thought I'd do is I thought I would begin by just asking panelists to go around and introduce themselves. So going in alphabetical order, we have Asha Easton, Immerse UK lead from the Knowledge Transfer Network. So if you'd like to go first, Asha.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. So I lead Immerse UK, as was mentioned, which is the UK's VR and AR professional network. So we are part of the KTN, which is a large organization that works on innovation and cross-sector innovation across all industries. So we have in-house teams in everything from health to manufacturing to infrastructure, etc. And then Immerse UK sits within that organization as something called an innovation network. And we're usually set up to last for a few years to help to kind of like boost an industry as it's growing, which is why Immerse was set up a few years back. But we've transitioned now, because of the success of the network, have transitioned now into a paid member organization. So we're partially government funded and partially funded by our members. And basically our role is to help facilitate cross-sector innovation across all industries that are affected by the technology, and to help make the immersive tech ecosystem in the UK a bit less fragmented. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Asha. And then moving on to Jacob Hooker, who is Director for Extended Reality and Wearables at ARM. If you'd like to introduce yourself and company, Jacob.
Oh yeah, no problem. So I work for ARM, which develops kind of the underlying IP or the blueprints which help to build the chips, but we also work with the wider ecosystem So industrial partners like yourselves, but also OEMs as well as software vendors. I'm located in Cambridge, been here for now in this role at ARM for almost 4 years now, but I have more than a dozen years of industrial experience in semiconductor and technologies, and currently leading the XR team here at ARM. So happy to be here.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jacob. And then moving on to Gerald Logan, who is Digital Implementation Manager at Thermo Fisher Scientific.
Yep. Thanks again for having me. That's right. My name is Gerald Logan. I am the Global Digital Implementation Manager for Thermo Fisher PSG. We implement augmented training, augmented reality tours, all kinds of related to that type of environment to bring in and help employees become more comfortable with work environments prior to actually entering the actual workforce.
Excellent, thanks, Gerald. And then last but not least, Simon Portman, Managing Associate at Marks & Clark.
Yeah, thanks, Alicia. Great to be here. Yeah, I'm also in Cambridge, although currently I'm working from home in East Cambridgeshire. I work for Marks & Clark. I'm an intellectual property and commercial contract lawyer, so I advise clients on the development and commercialization of technology from inception to rollout, and I head our XR team, and I'm also a member of our AI team. So a lot of the issues we're going to be talking about today are close to my heart.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Simon. So thanks all to the panel for those introductions. So to kick us off, I was going to direct the first question to Jacob. So Jacob, as our product specialist, I think it'd be really valuable if you could provide some definitions for virtual, augmented, mixed reality, sort of what the differences are between them, but also because of the context we're talking about this in, it's often sort of complex protocols rather than soft skills, although I guess that does come to it as well. So it's equally important, how you go about, picking the right technology pending on the capabilities of each. And I understand if you have some slides to help illustrate that, please do go ahead and share.
Yeah, I'll try to not talk too long, give the other speakers a chance. Let me share screen. Let me know when you can see the slides. So again, this is a perspective a bit hopefully resonates with you, but it is a bit ARM biased, so I apologize because we're the ones creating the IP. So it's in that context. Okay, share this. I don't know. It says it's disabled, so are you able to allow me to share screen?
Sorry, that should be better.
Yeah, let me give it another try then. Let me know when you can see it.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So I apologize because some of you might already know these definitions, and feel free to comment here. So I've been asked to kind of give a very brief kind of introduction to what is XR, so we're sort of all on the same page. So XR is really a number of technologies or use cases: IR, VR, and MR, so augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality. I first wanted to show a bit, though, how XR technologies have evolved. So you can think of it that it's both from fixed point of view, but also mobile, and both of these have kind of lived complementary and are leveraging technologies from each platform. So you have more of the mobile, so you think of smartphones and smart watches, but you also have laptops and TVs. And so this, in terms of form factors and how you would use this technology to work in the R&D force, could use any of these technologies. But when you look at the real hype, it's all really around kind of the wearables. So if you look at how industry is looking to support these within the context, if you look at midterm, longer term, it's really the stuff that goes on in your heads. So it's either smart glasses, so it's something that you can wear every day, or more virtual reality, where you kind of really more larger compute, where you're really embedded within that reality you're looking at. But longer term, it could be something more like, if you ever seen Minority Report, where it could be contact lenses or even something that's embedded within your body. So that kind of sets the context of the form factors and technology. And as I mentioned, XR is really all real and virtual environments combined, and particularly needs to involve, as was mentioned by Simon, some kind of artificial intelligence to enhance the full capabilities and take advantage of the technology. And it's usually a combination of augmented reality or virtual reality, and or a combination of these, or anything interpolated in between. So there could be a spectrum of definitions, but we do categorize them into these three areas, which I'll go into in the next slides a bit more in detail. And if you look at some of the industries or applications that really leverage these technologies, particularly in the context of today, which is R&D, it's effectively all the industries will be able to use this in some form. But as the use cases and the level of technology and research that they do is going to be different, you'll have an expansive use of different use cases and technology that you need to support, which on the one hand is great because a lot of innovation, but also on the other hand can be a challenge in terms of the complexity that you need to support. So if we focus first on AR being augmented reality, it's really about trying to enhance what you're seeing or hearing so that you can communicate better. Things could be about tracking health. So it's really about a focus on sensors, perception, and power is really important. So you can see an example where you're looking, if you think about Google glasses, smart glasses, where you're trying to look out into a real environment and enhance it with additional information. And VR is really about more experiences, so really immersive, where you're in kind of another reality where you're trying to interact with that. And this can be, obviously everyone's familiar with gaming, but I think there'll be more move to more social type of immersive interactions, which can be concerts, more immersive movies and sporting events. But also I think what we're talking about today, which also is also a big area, and I think will be gaining importance. And actually I already see evidence of this in some regions like China, for instance, where training, education, and R&D can be very important. So then video, high quality rendering, and ultra low latency becomes very important. And then when you talk about mixed reality, it really depends on if you're coming, how you explain this is whether you're coming from an augmented world or a virtual world, and then trying to move to mix those together. So a good example is if you're coming from an augmented world, such as augmented reality glasses, you have a real world content where you're trying to lock some virtual content into that. A good example is Pokemon Go, where you have an object that you've overlaid onto your real world. And one of the challenges, of course, is to make that virtual object have the same or follow the same laws of physics as the virtual world. So things such as inclusion can become very important, or you want to avoid, like on this hand, that it doesn't get blocked by the tree, or that it does. On the other hand, you can also be looking at things from a virtual world where you might want to have kind of a pass-through where you want to impose a real object into your virtual world. Like you can see, I don't know, you're sitting at home, but you're in the showroom or something of a car dealer, and then they can overlay a virtual car where you're then looking at it in a virtual way inside the showroom. And another good example of mixed reality where it's neither, kind of somewhere really in between is a good example is gaming, where if you really looked at Twitch or YouTube, you can actually see a person playing a game in a virtual world. So that's another application, and obviously can be extended to research and development domain. I just want to touch very briefly then on some technologies, and this is where use cases and the type of business vertical you want to address becomes very important. And if you take entertainment, and maybe I should actually expand that to infotainment, so it's not just about being entertained, but about being informed. Obviously, consumer enterprise is very important, and VR is kind of the main driver on short and midterm, and you have a number of technologies or features that need to be supported, such as rendering, motion tracking in terms of six dots, so 6 degrees of freedom. Also, you may want to catch your facial expression or eye tracking to know where you're looking. Same thing with training and guidance, which is very important for R&D. And these cover all sorts of enterprises where both VR and AR all-in-one, and AR all-in-one, an example of that is, I don't know if you've heard of the HoloLens 2, but it's a good example of a device where what you're doing is really looking into a real world and then overlaying that a lot of virtual information, such as training. And you could easily see this in terms of guidance, or if you're in an R&D environment and want to share a similar kind of a picture working on maybe a molecule, or looking, if you're doing surgery, looking at the same kind of object for all those participants. And then another key one is around navigation or location. So when you're traveling about, that can be very important. And then other features such as 3D mapping and also eye tracking, gesture tracking, knowing where your orientation is. So IMU, so your orientation is very important. So this is just an example, and hopefully gives you a bit better context of the things that can be important for the topic we're talking about today. So that's a bit it to there. Are there any questions, or how would you like to?
There was Melanie did pop one in the chat box, and I think you've kind of touched upon it. So I'm curious to know specific use cases for each type of extended reality in the R&D setting beyond training. Is there one that is more valuable than another?
Yeah, I think it really depends on, and I think there might be others who might be able to speak to this better, but it really depends on which R&D fields you're talking about. So it's the type of technology you might need to do. So in some cases, VR could be very important, where you don't need to have, interaction seeing upon the real world. So if you're trying to do some kind of looking at a molecule and just trying to look at how to adjust certain positions of atoms, you don't need to have a real world overlay in that. Whereas if you're in a surgical room where you might want to look at real use cases of being, overlaying a heart on top of the person that's on the operating table, then you probably want to use AR. So really, I think there is no one answer for all. And in my opinion, it's just a complex things that you have to kind of look at it industry by industry, and then what technology you want to use for that particular use case. I don't know if there's others who would like to comment on that.
I think, oh, sorry, Asha, yeah. Go.
Yeah, I'd just like to flag a company that might be of interest to this group called Slanted Theory. They have a software called in VR, which I think is quite interesting. And I believe they were the company that showed me a visualization of data of like cancer cells in their product. And it was very, very interesting. So I just want to flag it and put it in the chat there if anyone wants to take a look.
Yeah, I think that the usefulness of it is at that level, when you're looking at, say, training at a cellular level, or, in anatomy, so, you can go along a vein or the intestine, like in Fantastic Voyage, the immersivity helps. Also, of course, where you've got things that are, dangerous or expensive to do for real, any virtual element of training in things like surgery or the fire brigade help immensely. And even, outside our fields, something, quite as pedestrian as learning how to spray paint a car efficiently. You can learn that, which if you do it inefficiently, where you don't use enough paint, you have to go over it again. If you use too much paint, you've wasted the paint. You can obviously learn to do that virtually without wasting any paint. So as well as different types of technology, there are different benefits that will apply depending on the nature of the training in question.
That reminded me that I did have a slide. It's not comprehensive, but just to give you a flavor of the complexity. So again, I think there's a question around training and guidance. And as mentioned, it really depends, as Simon rightly pointed out, the context at which you're using it. And even though you think of training and guidance as something simple, it really will vary across not only business vertical, but then also the type of device or application you want to use to address that. I don't know if this is a good slide to show you the different use cases.
I would say, Jacob, that's a really good slide, because it shows the vast variety of different solutions that you have. Different, it shows a lot. It gives a whole lot of information for someone to have to take in. And so when somebody is asking, which direction should I go, or what should I use, that's really where you want to get down and talk to, what space you have available, what is your use case, what is your goal. What is your burning platform? What are you trying to accomplish? And then that way you can be better guided to maybe something that better fits what you're trying to accomplish.
And that's why I think those that are experts in this and the right consulting people can really help in making the right decisions. So it's not that I don't think everyone will have all the answers, at least in this point in time.
Thank you so much for sharing those slides, Jacob. Are there more slides, or are you at the end there?
No, that was it. I don't want to take up all the time because but I just thought this was useful when we talked about the complexity of use cases, and as Gerald pointed out, and I don't even cover all of them. This is just to give you a flavor of the challenges, but opportunities as well.
Certainly, yeah. You can dig down quite a lot, can't you, from just looking at this slide exactly into different types of applications and then fields, of course. So yeah, it's almost like a matrix.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And each of these will have different requirements on the type of technology you might want to use.
Yeah, that's quite an important point, sort of looking at almost the capabilities of the technology and what's it fit for. But I guess technology evolves, so looking forward as well where that's headed. So that's also a very important point as well. Yes. I was wondering if maybe I could move on to asking Gerald a bit about the applications that Thermo Fisher are currently using. So, and also, feel free to comment on the hardware as well that you're using for that. And interested to know maybe any space or applications where it hasn't worked so well as well.
Sure. So my background, I didn't mention that earlier, is 21 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and 15 of that is in the production environment, managing different areas. So I've dealt with a lot of different people over that time span. And when you talk about helping the person that's on the floor and getting them the information that they need to do their job correctly each and every time, this is where I feel like that this type of training actually is huge. It's very, I just can't even express how much how important it is. So I know with Thermo Fisher, what we started out with more or less was a virtual reality environment where you go in, you're fully immersed. As Jacob was talking about, you go in, you see an environment, you're actually interacting with pieces of equipment. We're moving more now to the augmented reality. Again, as Jacob was mentioning, the Hololens 2 technology. And because for me, I wholeheartedly believe that is a great end-to-end solution. You can bring an operator in, you put them in a device, you introduce them to the device, you build out a digital twin of a piece of equipment. And as Simon was talking about as well, and you may have something that is intrinsically maybe not, or you have to be real cautious of. I'm not going to say not safe, but you just have to be aware of your surroundings, what you're doing. You don't want to hurt yourself, nor do you want to cause any damage to a piece of equipment. So what this allows you to do is build out this digital twin. You can look at it right here in front of you. And that's why it all depends on whatever your use case is and how much space you have and where you are. With the HoloLens 2, for instance, and building out a digital twin, you can actually do that anywhere, right? You could do that in your office, a conference room. If you have big training rooms, you could absolutely do it. But what we've done is that we've built out an exact replica of pieces of machinery, and you're able to see that piece of machinery. I mean, the full scale size of the machine, and you're actually able to interact with the different parts. So if there's a card with media, be it pictures or videos, guiding the operator on what to do next, then the operator will perform that function, and then it'll move on to the next step. And so what's huge about that is that then you take that exact same device and then you go to the floor, and now you don't need the digital twin, right? You have the actual piece of equipment there, but you've built muscle memory. You've gotten acclimated to what the different terminologies are depending on what you're dealing with. Some people I know coming into the pharmaceutical industry, they don't have any pharmaceutical background at all. So that's tremendous, right? In helping them understand what to expect. The other thing is that sometimes you do have pharmaceutical experience, or even if it's not pharmaceuticals, you may go from one place to another that's doing the exact same thing, but they may call things something different, and they refer to things differently. Well, this helps get you acclimated that, oh, okay, this is what you're talking about. So you take this this same device onto the floor now, and you have this machine, and now you're familiar with what to expect. Now, I'll say this: there's nothing that will take the place, not yet, of actually picking up a piece of a piece of equipment and manipulating it. But what it does get you used to how to use it and what to expect. But then, like I say, you have the card and the media right there, and it's telling you the exact same thing. So some challenges is Wi-Fi. Fortunately for the H2, you once the guide is cached, you don't have to have Wi-Fi to run it. So that's huge. But you do have to have Wi-Fi capabilities to at the beginning anyway to start the session.
Excellent. Thanks, Gerald. Thank you. And how long has Thermo been implementing this sort of training program? I mean, is it widespread, global? Do you do this all over the world, or is it certain locations?
Yeah, sorry. It is global now. The VR Technologies started out right here in Greenville, North Carolina. And then now we've expanded it to Swindon, to different sites in Italy, and then other sites here in the States.
Excellent. Thank you so much for detailing that. So just moving on, so Asha, I'm interested to know a bit about sort of the acceptance of these technologies. So, because obviously you're cross-sector, you've had a lot of experience working in different sorts of environments and sort of seeing people's reactions or gauging reactions. Is it positive? Is it negative? And also, I'm interested to know about sort of learning styles. Are these sorts of technologies suitable for everyone, depending on how you learn?
It's going to be a general answer because I don't have data to back up, but I can just based off of what I've seen in different sectors and from what I've heard. I think that there's especially post-pandemic, there's a much greater interest in trying this technology. And a lot more companies are trying to experiment and get pilots off the ground. A lot of companies that had pilots already going are scaling up what they're doing and rolling out wider VR programs or training programs in their businesses. I think that I have heard that there's sometimes hesitancy to get senior management in some industries in headsets, and it can often just be a case of someone who's not a powerful person, maybe in a company, who doesn't like to feel vulnerable by putting on a headset in front of a bunch of people and not know what they're doing. So sometimes you can get a bit of pushback from people in a company that potentially they're not so open to looking a bit foolish in a headset, which is an interesting thing I would have thought of, because it just think, oh, but everyone, why would you not want to try it? But I think in industries like the creative industries, where everyone is just really interested in and open to trying new things, it can depend really. So and that's like a generalization. So but I just being conscious of the fact that not everyone is going to be super open, and knowing your audience. And something that I think I wanted to bring up, which I think you want to bring up later as well, is onboarding of using this tech. So making sure that you consider the whole entire immersion process, and like how you get people into the headset, what their experience will be throughout, and then what you're going to do afterwards. There's some really interesting audience research that was done by a group called the Story Futures Academy, which was funded by the Audience of the Future program from the UK government, that has been doing tons of different research and also upskilling people from different sectors with immersive tech skills. And in this audience research report, they speak about the fact that the lack of attention to the transition of the user from the real world into the virtual world and then afterwards has a huge impact on like their level of enjoyment and engagement in the experience, and also on, you know, what they're gonna feel afterwards. So building that into what you do and building that into your plan to get people in your organization interested is really important. I'm gonna just put a link in the chat to that report if anyone wants to take a look.
I think that's really interesting, actually. You mentioned kind of that transition phase. I mean, do any of the other panelists want to comment maybe on sort of perceptions from your experience?
Yeah, I was going to add, knowing your audience absolutely is huge. I have run into a couple of situations, Asha, where it was funny that someone would be like, no, I'm okay. You know, they're just wanting to watch what everyone else is seeing. That's one thing. The other thing I'll tell you is with the Hololens, I can show you all the videos in the world. I can, even better, I can call you into it and let you see what I'm seeing, but it does not compare to being able to put on that device and still see your real world and have other things overlaid into the real environment. The other thing, to Ash's point in talking about your audience, I was doing some training with some individuals, and you would tend to think that the older population would be a little bit more hesitant. They've been a lot more open to it than I would ever have imagined. The other thing is that when one of the comments that an operator made was he knew that he had been at the company for 8 years and knew the process very well and was very efficient in what he did. But what the details of knowing specific names of parts is what stood out to him. And he said, you know, I've changed that machine over so many times. And when you told me to go change it over, I knew what to do. I knew what the part looked like, but I never knew what it was called. He said, now you know, so that I thought that was a very powerful statement and very interesting as well.
Excellent. Any other comments from the panel, or shall I move on? Okay, so actually going back to maybe Gerald and Asha, so what advice do you have for companies that are looking to sort of set up, it sort of relates into what you were just talking about, but set up these technologies for the first time? So sort of best practices, any do's or don'ts, and maybe, I don't know, Jacob, if you have any insight there, or Simon as well, please feel free to jump into.
Yeah, I'll start with just like the few. I mean, the point about the onboarding, I think is very a big point to make. The second would be, you know, to probably just start small with a pilot, and you know, don't invest tons of money up front, I would say, into something that you know you need to start small and then see how that works and iterate from there. And I think that's a smarter move. I would also say that you should, yeah, those are really my two biggest ones, actually. Yeah,
100% agreed. Start small. Have your use case vetted out so that you know exactly what you're trying to do. Onboarding is definitely huge. And the other thing is, you know, make sure that your audience and then your team members, once you start implementation, know the why. I'm a very big proponent of helping the individuals that you're bringing in and putting them in this environment as to why we are doing it. You know, what I typically do are show videos introducing the equipment, get, you know, individuals used to the equipment, then take them in, and then again, that's part of the why as well. Why are we even using this? You know, what are we trying to accomplish here? And then at the end, getting them into the training environment, you know, and then again, reiterating the why you're doing this. And a big thing is asking the questions of what worked well for you and what did not work well. And then, you know, letting those same people, once you iron some of those things out, come in and see that, oh, okay, my voice does matter. and I help change what other people are going to see.
Oh yeah, getting the champion in the organization is really good. Getting those people who are then gonna, get everyone else really excited about doing it. Are going to sing the praises of the program. It's really a powerful thing to do. Another really valuable thing is also to, if you don't have any in-house XR experts, and you're trying to figure out where to start, it is valuable to get an XR consultant in, or who can help to shorten the process. Or there are companies like this one in the UK called Virtual Umbrella, for example. They've done all kinds of rollouts of XR programs and worked with like PwC and things like that, and helped to even just like set up the headsets and get stuff like loaded onto the Oculus Quest, for example, at a large, doing 300 headsets and getting them all synced up and sorting out all those kind of little bits that can make it frustrating, I think, to do if you don't have XR experience already. So I think that's also really valuable.
I think I'd add, as well as communicating to your employees why you're doing it, you also need to know why you're doing it yourself. So don't do it just because it's a gimmick. And also, as well as onboarding it gradually, budget for it and work out what you're going to need to do and how much it's going to cost to do it properly. And that's a rule for implementing anything new, I think.
Jacob, anything to add from sort of the engineering or product specialist viewpoint?
No, I mean, I think they've hit all the nails on the head. So use case, it requires some kind of change management. Know why you're doing it from a business perspective. So hopefully you have a good business case perspective, or maybe it's for a strategic reason. And as you say, also explain to those people who are impacted why you're doing it. So it's part of that general change. Have a good change management program around it. And if you don't have that expertise, again, totally agree with all that. Make sure you have the right people, even if it means bringing them in from outside.
Yeah, I think the inclusion point's really important, I guess, with any change. When you include people in that and you make sure that they're communicated to, I guess adoption becomes far more sort of, people are far more receptive to it. And I think the point about having a champion, that's a really good point as well, having someone to be the almost the point person. So if there's any queries or questions, and maybe someone on the shop floor, so to speak, someone reachable. I've seen that work quite well in organizations in the past. So yeah, all really good advice there. Thanks, guys. I'm going to move slightly on to sort of the legal considerations. That's you, Simon. So, we discussed this beforehand. So I think, firstly, moving on to sort of data privacy. So, when we talk about this, I mean, could you elaborate maybe what sorts of data we're talking about? So, what our users are kind of giving up, and then what are the concerns around that, and maybe what can be done?
Yeah, well, first of all, with anything like this, you're going to have, stuck on the system, because your XR means that you're interfacing remotely with people. You're going to have on the system personal data of the users, and that's just not contact details. It might be where they are. If you're using avatars and mocap, it might be their images. With any medical applications, you could have patient data. I mean, you've got to remember, that where you have a computer game, it's a computer game. If you use basically computer game technology to do research into or treat or diagnose a medical condition, like a stroke or dementia or whatever, it could suddenly become a medical device, albeit, a low category one. So as well as making sure you've got the necessary consents and privacy policies within yourselves, you've got to make sure that where you are using any licensed product that will enable your remote or virtual collaboration, that you have a look at the privacy policies, because certainly in terms of what might be done with the data on it, there is a higher level of protection for it in the UK and the EU than there might be elsewhere. And another thing is, be aware of the security element of this. You might get hacked, and that means that your intellectual property might be stolen, personal data might be appropriated. So, as well as having the cybersecurity measures in place in a technical term, you've also got to make sure that you have the right insurance in place. I think we're all aware that over the last few months there have been more and more successful and quite damaging hacks, including of medical establishments. So that is a very important issue to be aware of.
Just a sort of related in question. So if say a device requires users to give a certain amount of data about them, and if you don't give that data, that you can't use the device, then can you still give consent? Does that make sense? If there's no option to really change that, then
well I mean, again, it depends. It depends on the context of what you're doing and what you want to use, but the general rule of thumb, say in the UK and the EU, and this is being replicated in other countries now, is that if you need to make your data available in order for that product to work, then you're giving your consent by signing up to it. So whereas it's not an optional thing like signing up for marketing mail shots. So that where there is a legitimate justification for your data to be stored and processed, consent isn't necessary in the same way that your employer has to have your name and address and your bank details in order to perform their obligations to you and pay you. But at the same time, there will be there should be a detailed privacy policy telling you exactly what they're going to do and why. So you don't want to find they're doing things with it that you don't want. That's why, if say you're using an online or a virtual collaboration tool, it might say, in the UK and EU context, that that your data might be used in an aggregated and anonymized form for marketing purposes, but it's not going to be used, with you identified, so that it can either be sold or so you can get approached by a whole lot of unrelated service providers. In other countries, that might not be the case, so it's always worth looking at the terms.
Thank you. And we did discuss some other considerations as well. So, for example, IP considerations for immersive technologies and use of real-world trademarks, perhaps some exploitation rights. And so, any other comments along those lines?
Yeah, well, I think obviously if you're incorporating content and it's not yours, you've got to make sure you have the requisite license to it, and that will include video content, audio, image rights, or if you are incorporating third-party trademarks. I think for the context of what we're talking about here, I think the danger is that if you get into an immersive, collaborative, interactive dialogue, and you're all in the sandpit trying to design things, and it's immense fun doing it, in an immersive world. What you mustn't forget is that, just like any other collaboration, each party is going to be putting things into that. It's going to want its information kept confidential, and you're going to want to be quite clear about who owns what is coming out, what's coming out of that, and what the exploitation rights might be. Just like any other collaboration where it's lab-based or whatever, and so it is really a good idea to have those obligations and rights locked down in an agreement before you get the headset on and you start designing your ventilator or your new small molecule compound or whatever.
Thanks, Simon. So yeah, certainly some food for thought there, and things that those investing in this technology need to think about. So just word to any delegates, if you do want to ask any questions, now's an opportunity to speak directly with experts. So don't let that pass you by if you have any burning questions. So I was going to ask the panel whilst we wait to see if any questions come in. I know I think it was Asha or Gerald, did you mention Wi-Fi as a challenge? Were there any other sort of key limitations or challenges that an organization should think about when investing? I mean, cost, for example, is that a barrier? Is that getting better? So any comments there? From any panel?
Yeah, I'll say that I think that, again, it all depends on your use case. Some of the technologies are obviously a little bit more expensive to deploy than others. VR technologies, I think, are becoming a little bit more affordable. I know early on when you're using something, you would have to be tethered to a more powerful computer system to run the VR. Just like what Jacob was talking about, because I mean, the latency is a lot less in the virtual environment, but it takes a more powerful system to run that system. They are now coming where, well, you can get them with their Bluetooth, but it does. I think they're a little bit more. They're a little bit more expensive. I'll say that. Now, when you start getting into the talking about Oculus, that's a lot more affordable. If you could incorporate a system that you can use that type of technology. If you go into the augmented side of it and using like the Hololens, they can get pricey. But the key is that you can, they do sell now, and Microsoft does an industrial style HoloLens, and which makes it, especially in this day and time of COVID, easier to clean and pass between users to use them. So cost is something that you definitely have to take into consideration in looking at how many people you want to try to use this, and what again, it all goes back to your use case. It really does, because then you can put all that together.
Yeah, bearing in mind that $500 for a personal user, you need to use a Facebook account to use that, and if you're actually going to use it in a business environment, you need Oculus for Business, and I think it's like $1,000 a headset. So yeah, the prices can vary, bearing that in mind. Because I know some people have tried and if you try to use the personal version for enterprise, they'll block you, and yeah, just to be aware of that. So another challenge that I would flag beyond cost as well, though, is like, especially I'm assuming most people here are working at quite big companies, life science companies, is bearing in mind that the software or what you're using with the VR or AR headsets and whatnot might not link back to the actual, I don't know what, software or, is it your company is using, but like there's no interoperability necessarily between them. And that can be like a really big barrier for some companies, especially when, their cyber security issues are all really linked to what they already have built in, and that can end up being like a barrier to adoption for a lot of companies.
Yeah, I think in time these are problems that will lessen in the same way as the size of the headsets, and of course in terms of connectivity and speed, and that 5G should deal with a lot of the problems that people have had up to date. I mean, there have been problems in the past where, with online collaboration meeting tools, where people have just lost the sound or it's flipped out. But I think that 5G will in time solve that problem.
There's a question here about healthcare concerns. And I'm wondering if, and also says, can anyone use the headsets? And I'm curious, you mean like, is it healthcare concerns like COVID concerns, or like healthcare generally? Because I don't think I think the sharing of headsets has been like a really big question over the last year. But
I have so I was speaking to colleagues about this actually. Is there differences sort of in between males and females in terms of how they respond to, you know, the feeling or the sensation of when you use these technologies? Is there any evidence there or anything that, or not so much? No.
Not really. I think there's isn't really a gender difference of like how people accept it. I mean, certain people, you know, might feel dizzy. It's like that's something that's also been kind of it's an issue that's kind of gone away now. It was more around like the creation of the content and the quality of the content and the stability of it, which created that problem, which I think is not really a huge issue anymore because content has gotten so much better. Ashley just said that it was both questions about the healthcare concerns. Just to say that for COVID concerns, there are things that you can use to clean the headsets really well, like CleanBox, like UV technology. You put it in the CleanBox. And also, I know a lot of the hardware companies have been building the new headsets so that they're easier to take apart and clean better. And so I think like that's not so much of an issue actually. And actually, based off of research that I've heard about, like since the pandemic has happened around audience acceptance and if they're willing to put on headsets, that hasn't really been an issue. People really don't seem to mind, to be honest. And other healthcare concerns, I would say there's nothing about putting on a headset that's gonna, the health warning is like, you know, be aware of your surroundings and that don't hit things. That's the health concern more than anything else, to be honest. But now you have,
I think also like computer games, it's, you know, don't spend a day doing it.
Yeah, and things like the Oculus, for example, now you have like inside out tracking, which means it has like cameras on the outside of the headset so that when you're going to hit something, it actually turns them on so you can see the outside world when you're still in the headset. So issues like that are kind of going to go away as well. One thing I would mention, because you said, can anyone use the headsets? I think that there are still issues with accessibility for people with, you know, different accessibility issues. But those are all things that are starting to be, I think, addressed and looked at quite a lot in the industry, because, you know, it's not something you can't keep developing for disabled body people, for example. And I'm just going to link to a organization called XR Access, which is doing a lot of work on that. So if you're interested to look into that deeper, that's a good place to check.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Sasha, for highlighting all those useful links. So I was going to got one last question, sort of do a round robin for the panel. So I guess it's just looking towards the future. You know, we mentioned that sort of dare I say post-pandemic. Well, you know, we are seeing an acceleration, an adoption. You know, we've done similar events on laboratory automation, and it was all sort of very positive looking forward. So just a word from the panel on what you think the future looks like for the adoption of these technologies. So if I just go around and go to you first, Asha.
Sure. I mean, I think we're just going to see the one thing I'm really interested to see more of is what's going to happen with the future of like biometric data collection and what that's going to look like for training solutions and how companies engage with this technology. Something I'm also quite concerned about. I'm just going to link to this headset that's coming out called the HP Omnisept, which is going to have built-in eye tracking, pupil dilation tracking, face tracking, and also heart monitor. But they also now have like a software solution as well that will enable companies to visualize that data in a way that's actually meaningful to them. Because we have, you know, you could attach biometric sensors already in experiences, but it's becoming more of a full experience. And I think that's really, really interesting. And I'm going to link to one other podcast that I would love people to listen to that was done on a podcast called Voices of BR with Kent Bai, and he talks about the future of biometric psychography and what it could mean when you can have all of this data, because actually you could practically read people's minds with it. You know, look at what social media can do with just knowing our likes and dislikes, and linking all of that information about us to like all the information you can have about our biometric data. And that's a lot. And I'm not saying like it's necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying, you know, we've talked about privacy and opting in and out, and how we engage with all of that in the future, I think is really going to be really interesting and important.
Thanks, Sasha. Thank you. Very interesting indeed. It's very futuristic. Excellent. And Simon?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the pandemic has accelerated what was happening anyway. So I think although as we emerge from our bunkers, there is a real hunger for, you know, personal contact and travel again, I think the advantages of XR, you know, will remain. And so I think it is here to stay this time. I'm old enough to remember the early 1990s when it first took off, and I went to the Trocadero in the West End and had a go putting something the size of a toilet seat on my head, and then it just disappeared, you know. But it's come back this time. I think it is here to stay. There has been a debate over whether, you know, VR or AR are going to be the dominant area, and I think that's slightly the wrong question. I think that AR and VR are, even within industries, are going to serve quite separate customer needs. So I think they are going to evolve in, you know, in separate ways. So that even if the technology is the same, the way or similar, the way it's going to be applied and are going to sort of diverge and develop independently of each other. But, you know, if anyone disagrees, then, you know, I'm happy to hear that.
Thanks, Simon. And Jacob, sort of looking inward onto sort of the life science sector as such, how do you see it evolving in this industry?
Sorry, fully?
So how do you see the future of these technologies evolving within sort of pharma and biotech with a focus on sort of training and collaboration? I think we might have lost Jacob. I'll go to you, Gerald, and we'll come back to Jacob.
Yeah, I was really interested to hear what Jacob was going to have to say, knowing what he does. No, I agree. I think that the acceptance of this type of technology is just going to be larger and larger. I think that the fact that you can, you know, as artificial intelligence becomes more and more popular, that's going to be real powerful for, you know, we as individuals working in environments, the individuals on the shop floor. You're able to, with headsets, you're able to give so much more information to an employee on the floor, as well as being able to save, you know, put them in a safer environment. You know, if someone isn't paying attention, just like Ashley was talking about with the Oculus having cameras on the outside to stop someone from hitting a wall, if you're walking into an area or near an area that you shouldn't, then now that information could be given to you and it could help you. So, you know, I think a lot of people are very hesitant because of all the futuristic movies that scare us, right? But I think that it's here to stay, and we should embrace it and try to use the technology to help us in our day-to-day lives.
Thanks so much, Gerald. Jacob, is it okay to come to you now? You're back. Oh, and you're muted. Sorry.
No, I kind of mirror what everyone else is saying, and I'm a big believer in technology. So for me, it's not whether or not the technology gets there; it's more the wider things. Privacy, for example, is a big issue for me. Artificial intelligence is going to be a key driver of interpreting the information. So I see that as a big enabler. And I think also it's looking at having an integrated end-to-end solution. And I think that will be also a big challenge. So it's about how much is done in the cloud, what kind of connectivity what kind of software vendors you're going to use, how much does it need to be integrated with your current enterprise system. And those, I think, are going to be the bigger challenges, making it more of a smoother experience, and that people can accept kind of both the disadvantages, but also the advantages of it. But I think it'll get there. may just be a few years. I still think it's still quite nascent, but you can find some key use cases where now it could be very useful.
Excellent, thank you very much. So this brings us up to the hour, and I just want to thank all panelists for bringing their individual perspectives. It was really interesting discussion. And of course, you know, it is quite a broad topic, so we could talk about uses of this technology in far more ways still within our sector and industry. So who knows, maybe we'll return and focus on something different. But for now, thanks all for joining as well, the discussion, and wish you a good rest of your day. So thank you all.
Thanks very much for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Guys, thank you.